Bontrager tubeless tire installation tips. Part 1. Installing a tubeless tire with an inner tube. Installing a tubeless tire with an inner tube is basically the same as installing a standard tire with an inner tube, except that the tire will fit somewhat tighter. It's always a good idea to use a pre-stretched tire if possible, but you have to mount it first to stretch it. Stretching a tubeless tire involves mounting it on the rim and inflating it to 60 pounds per square inch and letting it sit overnight. Like with a standard tire installation, start installing the second bead of the tubeless tire with an inner tube at the valve stem. You can try to create slack by stacking the beads, but you still may need tire levers to do the final installation of the bead. And then pump the tire to 60 psi or 4 atmospheres. Part 2. Removing a tubeless tire and installing a tubeless valve stem. Let the air out of the inner tube, and then starting opposite the valve stem, use tire levers to remove the first bead of the tire. Remember to be careful when using tire levers with a tubeless tire. Damaging the bead could cause it to leak. Once the first bead is off, reach inside the tire and pull out the inner tube, and then remove the valve stem. Continue removing the second bead of the tire, with both the tire and tube removed from the rim. It's time to install the tubeless valve stem. Align the stem so that the slot in the base lines up with the rim. Then install the tubeless valve stem. Tighten the valve stem nut firmly so that the valve stem seals against the tubeless rim strip. Part 3. Installing a tubeless tire for tubeless use. When installing a tubeless tire with a tubeless valve stem, start the installation opposite the valve stem. Otherwise, the valve stem can make the tire fit too tightly on the rim. Again, finish the installation at the valve stem. With the first bead mounted onto the rim, it's time to apply a solution of soapy water to the entire rim and both tire beads. Not only will this help make the tire easier to mount, but it will also help it seal when we inflate it. Like with the first bead, we want to start installing the second bead opposite the valve stem. As you get close to finishing installing the second bead, you need to make some slack. You can create slack in the second bead by making sure it's in the bottom of the rim well, by rolling the tire. Pull the first bead up and on top of the second bead so that the second bead can be in the lowest possible position, and that'll make the tire a little more easy to mount. Once both beads are in the rim well, pull the beads out towards the outside of the rim, particularly in the valve stem area, so that you can get a good seal between the bead and the rim as you start to pump the tire up. And then it's time to pump like mad. As the beads seat, you'll hear an audible snapping noise as they pop into place. You want to hear that at least twice, and you may hear it more times than that as the beads seat. Of course, check the beads to make sure they've seated correctly. This is also a good opportunity to look for any bubbling around the rim. Part 4, for the tubeless ready system, installing super juice. Pull one bead of the tubeless tire away from the rim and insert the straw of the super juice container. Insert your preferred amount of super juice and inflate the tire as you would for a normal tubeless tire. Once the beads lock into place, rotate the tire in both a vertical position and on its side to thoroughly coat the entire inside of the casing.